Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the return of the Sulky Show. We've taken a few weeks off. Darren's been busy with work. I've been busy with work as well, I guess. But obviously, people have started to miss the Sulky Show. I've started to miss doing the Sulky Show. Darren can't be with us tonight, but he has given me permission to resurrect this for a little series now running on into the winter before we do our Christmas special. So tonight, I am joined by Tir Prince's racing manager, Eric Witherspoon. Hello, Eric. How are you?
Hello, Sarah. Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Now, this is part of a series where we're going to try and go around all of the four tracks that race in 2020, the four hard tracks, obviously Tir Prince, York, Corbywood and Amman Valley. We're starting with Tir Prince tonight because a few of you might have seen on social media that Eric's been doing a review of, in particular, the 2-year-old races and the 3-year-old races. There were a large number of stakes races staged at Tir Prince this year. Obviously, it was a big deal at the start of the season when COVID was kind of taking over and we didn't know if there was going to be a season. Those 2-year-old, 3-year-old and indeed some 4-year-old races were quite a big priority really for the BHRC and for the tracks that they had put into stage these races to actually make sure these races went ahead. You know, there's been a lot of money invested by owners staking these horses, and it was really important that if there was going to be a season, these races went ahead. And as it's transpired, those stakes races went ahead all over the country, but particularly at Tir Prince, you had some really, really good quality stakes races, Eric. You know, numerous Group 1 races. And obviously you put that review out on social media. Kind of just thought I'd get you on tonight. We'd have a little bit of a chat and not just talk about the stakes races, but obviously the other races that were staged at Tir Prince, and really give an overview of the season and what it was like from your perspective, having to do the kind of day-to-day work and the struggles of actually going ahead with all of this through this COVID pandemic that's been happening, which, you know, for a number of hours on Sunday afternoons or Tuesday nights, whatever days we were racing, we kind of got a chance to forget about it with the racing going on.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, it was March, middle of March, when COVID sort of dawned on us all. I remember walking down to see Adam to the maintenance shed, and some announcement had been made. I think it was when they said they were going to suspend all the business rates, and I sort of realised then that they wouldn't be doing that if this wasn't serious. Obviously, for Tir Prince as a business, it had huge implications because it was coming up to the busy Easter period. But the racing was due to start first weekend in May. So very quickly, as we started to make plans and arrangements and got locked down and all the rest of it, it became apparent immediately, really, that the Anto Russell wasn't going to be able to go ahead on that May. We sort of, obviously we had a lot to worry about. The racing was one thing that we had on our plate, but we decided pretty early that we weren't going to make any decision to cancel completely. A lot of people were contacting us saying, shall we turn the horses out, shall we cancel? And I think one thing that I'm proud of is the fact that our message remained constant throughout, and that was, we're just going to wait and see. I always had it, it's easy to say afterwards with hindsight, but I genuinely always had it in my head that we might be all right by sort of Breeders' Crown. And although that would mean missing a big chunk of the season, that you know, I always had it in my head that we would probably be able to start around then. Fortunately, as it happened, it started a bit earlier. So yeah, it was a lot of ups and downs, lots of to and froing. You know, there's a couple of times where I did think it was a lost cause. But I kept in touch with all the trainers, kept in touch with as many owners as I could, did Facebook Lives, just said, look, if your circumstances mean that you need to turn your horse out, then I fully understand that. But we are going to try, if we can, to at least put these stakes races on. I did suspend the payments for our stakes races, and I think the BHRC did the same for themselves, which administratively caused a few problems later on, but I thought it was the right thing to do at the time. And then eventually, as time went on and horse racing was reintroduced, the BHRC did a lot of work lobbying. We had, I think I came on this show in July and said that, you know, we'd had a direct line with the Culture Minister for Wales, we'd had Zoom calls with him and got it all passed to say that we could race behind closed doors. So we kicked off on the 14th of July, and we put all the North Wales stakes races on that day. And it was, you're right, it was it was great because everything was still pretty much locked down then. The arcades were all still locked, all the pubs were closed, the market wasn't open, but we were able to race. And from that point of view, that was quite good, really, because racing really did take centre stage. Obviously, we were streaming it for the first time, and I think everyone was just glad of something to do. You know, we'd more, you know, at that time of year, you know, we had that many of the staff on site doing everything went perfectly because we had the manpower all delegated to do that one thing. So yeah, it was great. And obviously, when I wrote that review the other day, I was just, sometimes when you've been pushing on with something, it's not until it stops that you're able to have a little look back and see how it went and what happened. And yeah, I mean, I think Yerkes Hanover won the first race. He broke the track record. You know, I'd heard little bits about him before at York. I hadn't seen him actually. I was watching the streams from York when the qualifiers were on, but I remember speaking to Patrick Kane in Ireland, and we were discussing the 2-year-olds, and he said Rocker had one, and I just couldn't place it, but I could certainly place him the week after when he went whistling past. Brilliant. He like I say, he was really good. And I think I was also thinking back the other day to the show that I did with yourselves, and I'm pretty certain I said about Alan Haythornthwaite, I said he has got form in this race, or Team Haythornthwaite, should I say. You know, don't do anything in qualifiers, just professional, and then come whistling in the North Wales race, the first race. And he did it with Air Contessa, didn't he?
Yeah.
They did it with that. And she was, I liked watching her. I think I like that. I like that mare. It's Air Queen, isn't it? I like that breed. Been really good for the Air Stud.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, great family. Said to be sweet, won for the Laidlers as well. She wasn't very well fancied on the day, to be honest with you.
No, possibly a bit. Yeah, I remember at the time thinking, I mean, it wasn't a huge surprise because I had seen these horses in qualifiers, and she'd been going, you know, fairly well in qualifiers. But I don't think she was. It's difficult to say they weren't bookmakers there for me to look at prices to see what the market was dictating. Yeah. But to me, she was a little bit of a surprise winner. I hadn't quite expected to win the race in the manner that she did. She was when she came to the line, she finished the race very strong, and she hadn't looked as strong a finisher in her qualifiers beforehand. I can just remember that it was a good starting night for the Labours, particularly like you say with Yerkes Hanover, and then Said to be sweet following up.
Yeah, and then Triple S, of course. Won on the same day, showed absolute breathtaking speed, made a little break going out the gate, lost a bit of ground, and then you know, just went away. Showed really good speed that night. She did as well. So I think the Laidlers had a quick fire hat trick there, didn't they? And then
a good opening night at Tir Prince, and I can just remember. I don't know if anybody else. I say opening night. I think it was like an afternoon meeting. It's difficult to tell.
Tuesday afternoon.
It was a Tuesday. I had to take an afternoon off work to get there. Just remember the pressure. That was my first night of being the official photographer.
Yeah.
I had Mandy absolutely rattled because I'd been on Facebook saying, "Oh, the nerves are getting to me," and I turned up and she thought, "Are you going to bottle this before you even start?" And I was like, "No, I'll be fine once I get going." And it was, and it was such a good afternoon of evening of racing. It was a really enjoyable night that first night. There were some really good performances, and some of those horses went on to then win other races at Tir Prince. The season went on.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I mean, they're usually quite a good barometer, them races, for horses to go on and win a few more of the stakes races. Obviously, the next nights or the next round of stakes races that we had after that was we held the dragon races for Tregaron, because obviously, unfortunately, Tregaron fell foul of COVID-19. We were asked to host them, and we're delighted to do so. And then I think Air Contessa made it a double, didn't she? And in the 3-year-olds, I'm happy. No, that was a couple of weeks after, actually. That was a bit later on, because the 2-year-old and 3-year-olds were on different nights, weren't they? But yeah, so we went on to the dragon races then, and Yerkes Hanover, bloodless victory again. I think he was a few seconds slower, but I think Rocker just looked after him. Air Contessa won a division. And Air Ambition, she made a mistake, and she was the red hot favourite, really, wasn't she, in the North Wales race at the beginning of July? but she spooked a bit going out the gate, shied a little bit, caused a few problems, but she got it right when she came back the second time in August. But they were a good crop of fillies, that, to be honest with you. I think when you look back, I think you'll look back because there was a couple of decent ones in there that perhaps were just unlucky to be a 2-year-old in the year that they were. And Adam Jones is one, the one that he had with Mick.
Yeah, and there was also a Showtime I'm a Lady as well. Mick was driving training, I think, Showtime I'm a Lady. I think I spoke about this when I put a blog post out the other day about the 2-year-old fillies division was quite open, probably for the first maybe, I think it was like 4 weeks, maybe even 5 weeks. Longer. I don't know. It was only when a certain filly started racing mid-August that the competition kind of got blown apart a little bit. But those first few stakes races at Tir Prince, you know, they were different winners. Air Contessa doubled up, but there were various winners of those stakes races up until the point at which obviously Oakwood Annabella kind of joined the fray. And then the rest is kind of history.
It is. And I'm going to, obviously we're quick enough to say when we get things right. And I'm going to be really honest here. Although she'd gone well round York, I mean, I think I said this in my write-up, I think she went 2-1 round York first time out. And I knew that John Gill had liked her because I'd had a filly in training myself, and I'd been up there. I spoke to John about it anyway, and he said that he liked her. He'd had she'd been causing a few problems where she'd been elsewhere. She'd been running off the track. That's how she came to him, because the people that had her previously, she was running off the track. She was a bit problematic, but he said since she'd been there, she hadn't put a foot wrong. Next thing I saw her were at York, I think in 2-1. But when I hadn't seen her with my own eyes, I'd seen her on the video, but you can't beat seeing him in the flesh, can you? And drawn 6 on the gate in a 2-year-old race at Tir Prince in the Breeders' Crown. I remember thinking, well, this is going to have to be an absolute superstar to win from here, because it was a good race. And she is a superstar, isn't she? To be fair, you know, afterwards, I was pleased to be proved right afterwards, because that's easily the best 2-year-old fillies performance I've seen since Robin Camden raced in the North Wales race, first time I'm out. And a little going off on a tangent, there's a little story there. I remember when Robin Camden came to Tir Prince for the first time, and she was trained by the Duns. But I'd been speaking to Joseph Mound, and obviously, you know, the Lyons Mound family have had a lot of good horses in the UK, a lot of fantastic horses overseas. So they know when they've got a good stakes horse, don't they? And Joseph had said to me that he really liked a particular 2-year-old filly that he had, and that he thought she was one of the best he'd ever had, and that he didn't think she'd be beat. And I happened to have dinner on the day of the race in the cafe in Tir Prince with Christy Dunn. And he doesn't say much, Christy. And he asked me about the race, and I said, look, you know, Joseph thinks he's got one in there that'll win it. And he just finished on it, and he never said the next word he said. He just went, I've got news for him. That's all he said. I've got news for him. And yeah, she came out. I mean, Clive Kavanagh drove her, painted the fence with her, you know, was all over the track, had a terrible trip, and she won. And obviously we know what she went on to, and I think Oakwood Annabella's, when I saw her win like that, she did, drawn 6 with Vicky, you've seen a superstar then. And she could, with luck, with injury and everything, she looks like she could be another one that goes over the pond at some point and does what Robin Camden's done. Yeah,
definitely. And like you say, it was Breeders' Crown night then that she kind of made it. Well, I think that was her Tir Prince debut, wasn't it? Breeders' Crown night.
Yes,
so that was late on into August. And as you know, it was 2-year-old fillies that had been winning up to that point, and then she came into the mix. 2-year-old colts, and obviously UX Hanover wasn't eligible for the Breeders' Crown, being an import. So back to Breeders' Crown night. I mean, it's a great night anyway. You know, fantastic. Yeah. Great prize money, really, really well run, not just, you know, by yourselves at the track, but also by David.
No, of course, yeah.
And that to me, that was probably my biggest, like my highest pressure night of taking photos. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
John had always said to me, you know, you go and shoot races at Tir Prince, and these are career-defining races for horses. He was like, this is a big deal for you to do this, because people are going to want those photos. And I know he was trying to kind of like build it up and say, you're really getting somewhere with this photography, but all it did was put enormous pressure on my shoulders. And Breeders' Crown night, I think I felt it more than any other night, because there was no let up in those races. You talk about the Dragoness races and the Dragon races. They were in mixed cards. There were other races where I can kind of like the foot comes off the gas a little bit, and I think to myself, I've got a trot or a cat race. I can kind of just relax a little bit and not think to myself, the photos that people definitely want. They want to have these moment to remember. Breeders' Crown night, it was just full on all night, just one race, 7 races, all Breeders' Crown races, and just the quality of horses that you're watching race on those nights as well. At that point in the season, you started to sort the wheat from the chaff a little bit, and you're really starting to get into the nitty gritty of the really good horses in each division racing against each other.
Definitely.
So, I mean, aside from it with Annabella, what else was kind of a highlight for you then, Breeders' Crown night?
Churchview Frankel, Bernard Nicholson came over, and that trainer and connections, they take the Breeders' Crown very, very seriously. And I think you mentioned David Wilson there and Jackie. It's great organising the prize money that they managed to put on through the sheer hard work of getting people to keep nominating the stallions, and then chasing people for the payments, getting them to put the yearlings in, put them in as foals. And I think it's going from strength to strength, to be honest with you. I think certainly the feeling that I get is that in Ireland especially, the numbers of subscriptions from Ireland for the Breeders' Crown are not just from the big stables, from people all over Ireland. It has really pushed it on again to the next level. So yeah, it was great to see Churchview Frankel come over, win that race, and I think that particular stable and those connections had a night that, well, they'd be lucky to have it again, basically, because it was a night of a lifetime. Churchview Niche won the 3-year-old fillies, Oakwood Annabelle won, Churchview Frankel won, Newtown Jody, which they're connected to, won. I think they won 4 out of the 7 races on the card, so I was pleased for them. Obviously, with COVID and all the rest of it, there was no big party in the bar afterwards. They sort of managed to have a quiet couple of pints in the outside bar outside, but the smiles they were wearing, it didn't matter to them. They'd already had their fun. But that's what's sticking in my head. Seeing them all stood together after the racing, all family, and they had their little lads and stuff with them, and they were pleased as punch. And I remember thinking that must be a good feeling to be able to come here and win all them races like that, because it takes some doing.
Yeah, I mean, it was a particularly strong night for, obviously, the connections of those horses to start with, but in Ireland in general, when you look at Lady for Dollar winning as well that night.
Lady for Dollar, I should have mentioned him earlier.
It was an Irish night, really. Breeders' Crown UK and Ireland really heavily went in favour of the Irish. If we did what they do at Cheltenham, where they, Cheltenham Festival, they do the Irish versus the, British, jockeys and all that sort of thing, and trainers and whatever. Ireland really won that night. 5 of the 7 races.
They did, and they did. And do you know what? Over the last few years, certainly the last 2 years has started to feel a bit like that. That's what I say. I just get the feeling now that in the way that, we'll move on to the VDM shortly, but in the way that over the last few years, the English trainers have really targeted going over to Ireland for the VDM, I think that the Irish trainers have really targeted the Breeders' Crown and coming over here. I think that they've made that their big night, and they've reaped their rewards for it. If you look at the results for the last 2 and 3 years, they've really reaped the rewards. But no, Breeders' Crown was a great night. I mean, I was so pleased to have been able to put that on. We went for something to eat the night before with David Wilson, and he'd only attended the funeral of his lifelong friend, David Morton, the day before. And it was really good. I was so pleased for us, of course, as a track and for the connections, but I was pleased for David as well that we managed to get that ahead, because sort of April time, the conversations that we were having, he wasn't sure, and I'd hung my hat on the fact that we were going to be able to have that meeting. And I think if you spoke to him, he'd back me up and say that even when COVID-19 was in its worst, I kept saying to him, David, this meeting will go ahead. I'm thinking it'll go ahead. And so that, for me, I was really pleased with that.
Now, obviously, we've kind of gone through the 2-year-old races and found ourselves at Breeders' Crown meeting end of August. We'll have to jump back a little bit because the 3-year-old and 4-year-old races are kind of slotted in a little bit in amongst those meetings. All those meetings we talked about, definitely, they all feature 2-year-old races, but the 3-year-olds kind of dotted around a little bit. Jump back a little bit earlier.
I think the 3-year-olds. One thing I really liked about the 3-year-olds was the selection of horses that won. You know, I mean, if we go through them, the North Wales races, Triple S, who we touched on, won. Which Guy Am I made a comeback after his injury, come out and won. And then obviously we're just talking about Tir Prince for the purposes of this. So the next 3-year-old race we had then was the Derby for the Colts and Geldings, which I'm a happy fellow won. You know, regardless of what happens, I'll never forget being in the commentary box and seeing Jeff Robson run all the way down the home straight following home. Because
and then kissed me when he got there.
Yeah. That
was the night I'm sorry, and we can say it now because nobody's going to come in and shut Tir Prince down now, not let's race next week. But social distancing and the protocols went out the window because I went to shake the guy's hand, kissed me. So very sorry. Everybody, including Jeff's wife. But I was the victim, let's be honest. I was caught up in the emotion.
I was thrilled looking out down. And it was just I very rarely left the commentary box this season because we're having to phone the results through to the press association. I think about 4 or 5 times I nipped out because I wanted to see someone. That was one of them.
Yeah,
I went down. I just said well done to him. I didn't want any big conversation with him, but I just wanted to be near him and witness it and soak it up because he was absolutely delirious. So that was brilliant. And then obviously the Oaks split into 2 divisions. Rainbow Rider had been pretty poor the week before and wasn't particularly, you know, I think the bookies everyone seemed to be out to get her, really. The bookies were out to get her and she wasn't that fancied. She absolutely danced in, won by, you know, any amount of distance. And the other one was Oakwood Lex Boogie, one for Michael O'Mahony and what's an Arabs Ring Me Back ran a big race in that race. So you had different winners there. Then obviously we held the Dragon, and Air Rhythm won for the Foodies and Lee Fletcher, led from pillar to post.
Remember that night? That was I thought it was a great drive from Lee Fletcher that night. A really great drive, and it was a surprise win for a lot of people. I don't think it was a surprise win for Lee or for Jack Foodie. I think Jack and got a lot of faith in the horses that they've bought.
Definitely, yeah.
And so they should, because the quality of the horses they've bought is exceptional, and it started to maybe sometimes people. I sometimes feel that this is how it looks from my perspective. Is that sometimes when people spend big money at sales, certain people automatically want those people then to fail. They don't. Some people like the success story of buying a cheap horse and winning the big. It's the Colford Tetrick kind of story, and those stories are absolutely brilliant. But sometimes there's that feeling that because somebody spent quite a bit of money, and maybe it's not the kind of money they would spend themselves, they automatically. I hope that horse doesn't win, or I don't think it will turn out as good. They've spent too much money on it, and sometimes then. You get disillusioned yourself a little bit, and when the results aren't going, you come up against a horse. Air Camelot and Yerkes Hanover, for example. Air Camelot is such a lovely 2-year-old colt and comes up against Yerkes Hanover. That's just the luck of the draw, really.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
And I just remember that night when Air Rhythm won. I remember turning around and seeing Jack Foodie coming down the home straight. It was the biggest smile on his face, and I was trying to. And it was a really nice moment for them as a collective. As a group of people. Of course. Did all these stakes races across the country, and they've had some really lovely horses over the last few years. They've won some good races.
Of course they have.
That night that Air Rhythm won, I was impressed with the drive, impressed with the filly as well. And I think for some people it was a surprise, and maybe even myself it was a surprise. But I don't think. Yeah,
well, Rainbow Rider was in the race, wasn't it? I think that was Rainbow Rider was in the race and was strongly fancied, but
and Lee went out in front. The track. Rainbow Rider
won the week before, but Lee got out and got going, and he won the race. She won the race well and won on her merits, and I was delighted as well, to be honest. Really pleased.
I did enjoy that one. That's one that probably does stand out for me. Was the night that Air Rhythm won. It it was a race I really enjoyed watching. Like I say, the
Yeah.
drive and just the underdog thing, I guess, a little bit.
Of course, yeah, and it's good. And like you say, when people have, I mean, the foodies are great to deal with. I deal with, with everyone in this sport, with the stakes races and taking entries and all the rest of it, and they're straight down the line. Yeah, that one's paying. It's done. Can we enter this? That boom. You don't get any problems with them. So, and like you said, they've invested heavily. They're gentlemen to deal with. So I was delighted to see it win as well, because, like you say, it's not an easy thing to do, to compete at stakes level at Tir Prince all the time. Doesn't, because, even if you were the only person who was, if you were the only person that was able to go out and spend the top money and buy a top horse. But the thing is that everyone's doing it. If you go and spend 12,000 for a horse, somebody else is spending 25, somebody else is spending 15. And I think people need to realise how difficult these races are to win at that level. I mean, it's difficult enough to win a maiden. Go and find yourself a maiden. Go and find yourself a maiden that'll go 2-3 and try and get a win with it. It's not easy, believe me.
You did it this year.
I know. That's exactly that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Why do you think I said it? It's true, though, isn't it?
It is. It's not. Winning races in general is not. Yeah. We're talking about the highest quality races here.
We're talking about £5,000 races.
Yeah.
With
and realistically, one bite at the cherry as well, because although there are multiple stakes races, you're only getting one go at the 2-year-old or 3-year-old breeders.
Sure.
One go at the North Wales, one go at the Dragon or the Dragoness. It's the pressure really is on. So when you win one of those races, it's completely understandable that you can see the elation that people are feeling, the emotions that they're going through afterwards, and how delighted they are to win those races. It's perfectly understandable.
Definitely.
It's a big thing. Of course it is.
Definitely, 100%. And then if you go and, I mean, the 3-year-olds changed again then. We had, what was the next 3-year-old races that we had? Trying to think now. What other 3-year-old winners did we have? Help me out.
Done Derby and Oaks. We've done Dragon. We've done North Wales.
Yeah, we've done North Wales. Those were the ones, weren't they? That Breeders' Crown.
I think they were, and
Breeders' Crown. Yeah. So Churchview Niche obviously was a different winner in the Breeders' Crown. We've touched on her, and Star Attraction.
There we go. We talked about this off camera before. How can you forget Star Attraction?
Yeah, we've forgotten. Yeah. Because he actually ran a decent race the couple of weeks before when in the Derby. He finished well, because earlier on he'd looked like, I mean, he's always looked a nice horse, but we've just talked about how difficult they are to win. And I saw him earlier on in a race, and I thought, well, he's going to struggle to compete with these. He's going to be a nice horse, but he isn't going to be a stakes horse. And then I think the stable was under a little bit of a cloud, probably had a little bit of sickness, and then he caught my eye a little bit in the Derby, and I thought he might run into a price in the Breeders' Crown. But he won and won well, to be fair. And again, that was another one I was delighted for. Fletcher's invest year after year after year. Team Haytham, great people to deal with, and they managed to pop up and get a winner on the big night. That was a competitive race. That they were, I'm a Happy Fella, Matushus, Rocker's other horse, Frisco Tex. It was
a competitive.
It had depth to it, didn't it?
I can remember, I think that was the race where there was maybe 4 or 5 wide. As they come off the turn, they started to fan across the track, which is, as a photographer, my worst nightmare is when they start doing that. And I can hear Darren just left, right and centre, and I'm thinking, right, who am I committing to here? And from that group were coming towards me then, Star Attraction was the one that kind of kicked on and did emerge then. The winner really was quite easy to finish, thankfully. It's a good job it's a long straight at Tir Prince, and I had time to focus on a horse. But no, it was, and again, maybe a bit of a surprise winner to people who studied form.
I think he was about 8 to 1. He was about 8 to 1. I think I might have said, I'm pretty certain that I said he could run into a place because he'd gone all right the week before. But I mean, Matushus had won at York. I'm a Happy Fella was on a hat trick. Frisco Tex, he'd won a maiden at York, but he, to all intents and purposes, he looked like he was going to win the North Wales race, which broke in the straight. Looked well capable of going 2 minutes. Stateside Dude was in the race. He'd run a big race in the Derby. I think it was 2-1 the field.
It was a very, very competitive field, and as you mentioned, he's star attraction. If he was 8-1, he's essentially rider in the field, and it was strong. It was a strong competitive race.
Good race.
It was that was another. You're right. That was an enjoyable one, and it's nice to see a spread sometimes as well. As nice as it is to see kind of a standout horse in a division, you do find those gems, those superstars kind of go on and follow, like your Oakwood Annabellas, for example. It is sometimes nice as well. There is that spread across it because it
definitely
keeps coming back year after year. If you've got multiple winners in different divisions, it just says to people, we don't need to worry about having the one, because it is just winning one of those races. As nice as it is to go out and say, right, I want to win every 2-year-old or 3-year-old or 4-year-old race next year. The chances of doing it are almost
takes some doing. Yeah, right. I mean, we'll look at Yerkes Hanover. He was unbeaten at Tir Prince, but even him, he looks to me, to all intents and purposes, like he's going to be a free-for-all horse. He looks that good, a 2-year-old can go 2 minutes, but he was beaten a couple of times. And maybe Oakwood Annabelle, the fact that she was a bit troublesome early on, meant that things panned out perfectly for her, really, because she came quite late, didn't she?
Yeah.
And was absolutely foot perfect when she did come. Do you know what I mean? And so yeah, maybe that was that. But the 4-year-olds we mentioned when we had a chat earlier on, Ladyford Dollar. I don't think he's ever been beaten at Tir Prince.
No, and similar to Rainbow Rider, I can remember Rainbow Rider came. She won one of the North Wales at the opening meeting. She went back. Went back to Portmarnock and was below par, really. And then upon her return to Tir Prince, some people had question marks hanging over and said, "Oh, she wasn't great when she went back." And Ladyford Dollar was the same. Ladyford Dollar had turned up at Tir Prince. He'd won quite convincingly. I think he beat Northern Pride. I think Northern Pride he raced the first
in the North Wales race. He raced. He led all the way.
And I think Northern.
Stevie did a masterclass from the front.
Yeah, I certainly fancied Northern Pride.
I did.
At that stage, knowing that you're talking about the VDM winner, and he's been a multiple winner at 3, and he was kind of the Scottish flag and everything into the race, and I really strongly fancied Northern Pride. And Ladyford Dollar for me that night was I'm not going to say a massive surprise. It was a little bit of a surprise.
No.
I had really strongly fancied Northern Pride, but then upon his return to Portmarnock, things just didn't seem to be going as straightforward as they had done that night at Tir Prince.
No.
And I still think he won a couple of races. He was placed a couple of times. He wasn't running badly by any stretch of the imagination. But coming back to Tir Prince then to race off the back of the form at Portmarnock, a few people are saying to themselves, is it good enough what he's done in Ireland to come back to Wales? With the travelling as well, is it good enough to come back and win? And ultimately the answer was yes. He came back the same as Rainbow Rider did. He came back and he performed on the night when he needed the stage.
Yeah, definitely. He's a good horse when he gets in front of Tir Prince. Stevie knows how to drive him. He tends to try and get to the half in quick first quarter, send him to sleep at the half, and then they can't beat him. Drove him perfectly, and he's a horse I'm looking forward to seeing, to be fair. I mean, Walter and Carmel, great people. They love being able to come to the UK with a really good horse. Obviously they raced Dollar's sire, didn't they? Ladyford Dollar's sire, all over the place, track record holder, absolute tremendous horse. So yeah, it's nice to see him coming over. And like I say, this year I'm probably exactly the same as you. Certainly the first time I thought he would be beat. Second time, you just thought something clicks with him and Stevie around here. And I think the Irish form, I think you're right, but there was a few horses like that, Ireland, in Portmarnock this year, in terms of the way the form was when it came over. You were thinking, I've seen that struggle, but I think as they move more and more towards French trotting in Ireland, sometimes I think it can be a hard place to have a pacer over there now. The way that the amount of horses that they've got in training as pacers, I think you can be in deep every week, or even if you've got a really good one, you'll win one week and the next week you go in up again, and I think the levels are quite high there as that you're going up. Does that make sense?
It's like a concentration, particularly at the higher end. I found that from the racing in Ireland is the week-to-week racing at Portmarnock, not so much the bigger handicap events, the big weekends they have, but just your week-to-week kind of meetings. You've got this concentrated pool of horses, with the pace. And once you've got one that kind of has moved up the grades a little bit, although I think Lady Fadala possibly still sits relatively low into the system, because the way they penalised 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, based on their etc. But it's, I don't know, something you would think logic would say to you that the travelling away from home would make it more difficult for them. But
it seems to have worked in their favour.
Well, and also I think maybe, particularly with the horses, they're picking out dates that they're racing. They've got a focal point to prepare for. That's the kind of key thing here, is getting a horse ready for a specific event. You've got that date in mind and you can start training for it. It's not so much the same as particularly with a horse can maybe go off the boil a little bit as well. We're talking about
getting them ready for the big day, aren't they?
Yes, and then they're doing the travelling, they're coming over to race, and then why really are we surprised that the following week when they race back home on their own soil, they're a little bit below par. They've done the travel, they've put the effort in on the race, they've run the big race on the big night, and the following week, they probably have dipped back, below where. And they need to get built back up again for those big nights that are coming up, in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks' time.
3 weeks, yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing Lady Fadala next year. I think from my point of view as Crocker Gold and all the rest of it, obviously this year Crocker Gold was just one race, but I would definitely like to get back to having the heats, and we need all the good sub 2 minute horses that we can get to compete at that level. So I'm hoping that he steps up, and Walter and Carmel will bring him over a few times next year, and he'll try and follow in his dad's footsteps, hopefully.
I think that's a realistic kind of goal for them, an expectation for us then from them. Raced for a few dollars more at that level for numerous years. And that really kind of that kind of draws a close.
We'd have to mention Newtown Jody, wouldn't we?
Oh, I was going to say, we've got to draw a close to it. We did briefly touch upon Newtown Jody on British Crown Night, but no, you're right, Newtown Jody, who mixed. She mixed some of the stakes races for 4-year-old mares alongside the Stagby Future Brood Mares race as well. There as well. So she was mixing a little bit of company outside of stakes races into mares only race mares as well. But Newtown Jody, she had another phenomenal season.
She did, brilliant. I mean, she was quite unlucky a few times as a 3-year-old. She was unlucky in the 3-year-old Breeders' Crown. One broke in front of her. She won the heat, and something else happened to her another time. And I think she was up against Oakwood Starkham as well, wasn't she, when she had the big races in Ireland? So I think she deserved last year, really, where everything fell for her. She deserved it, and unbelievable, really. She cleaned up all the 4-year-old races. She won obviously we were fortunate enough that we hosted the Dragon as well, so we got to see her in that as well. She won that well. She won the North Wales race well. Obviously she won the Breeders' Crown. I mean, she won from the wide draw in the Breeders' Crown, and again, it was another one. There was some good horses in that. And she was drawn out in 6, and I wasn't stood there, but I do know somebody that was stood right next to Richard Gill, and Vicky had a good couple of winners on the night, hadn't she? And she decided she tried to lead out from out wide, and Richard turned to the person who stood next to him and went, "That wasn't the plan." But obviously Vicky's tail was up.
Yeah, the plan goes out the window.
Vicky's tail was up. Yeah. And obviously she absolutely jogged in. And the one time, to be fair to her, the one time she competed at free-for-all level, she drew 8. She ran over 1.25 miles in the British Pacing Classic. And I watched her closely that night because I'd fancied her for a place. She never got placed, but she ran well. Vicky couldn't get her in a position. She sat parked all the way around in free-for-all company with Rock and Mambo and everyone. And she finished well. And she's another one going back to because I believe that she's not going overseas now. I believe that plan has changed. So we're going to be fortunate enough, please God, to see her campaigned again next year. And of course, yeah, she'll run in the mares races, and they're great series that Stagby do there, and the one that you do at Corby Wood is a great series as well. But it'd be nice to see her running them free-for-allers as well.
Yeah,
because there's another year's growing and another year's strength. She's another one I've got my eye on to be able to say, come on, let's put some big racing on.
Well, you've touched upon hopefully being able to run essentially heats of the Crock of Gold.
Definitely, yeah.
Like sub 2 minute horses, come and race in these races, and we've seen it before. Laneside Lexus has won the Crock of Gold. There's nothing.
Brilliant, yeah.
Breed's Passion has won heats of the Crock of Gold as well, and that's drawing these mares into those free-for-all races is not outside the realms of possibility at all. So it'd be nice to see her step up into that kind of company too.
Definitely. So I'm hoping that both of those 4-year-olds will come up and compete in free-for-alls at our track next year. And boost the numbers a bit. And listen, they'd be coming up with a good chance of winning, wouldn't they?
Yeah, definitely. And on that note, now I can wrap up.
I think that does, yeah.
The summer section. We had there was a distinct split really in terms of how Tir Prince's season ran. You had the kind of the summer sort of stakes races. There were plenty of trotting races. There were handicap races, maidens, novices, all that sort of thing. But that was really your season wrapped up then. And you kind of moved into and then there was a distinct split really kind of after the original Crock of Gold night before you moved into what you would call the autumn season. But from September kind of onwards, the focus moved away sort of, from the stakes races and moved
from stakes races,
moved towards kind of your handicappers, your free-for-allers, trotters with various races that were going on, the kind of Trot of Gold.
Trot of Gold, yeah.
That was something that was new this year.
Yeah, loved that. Based on, obviously, we're the home of the Crock of Gold. Wanted to do something for the French trotters. I think that in the last 2 years, as more and more of the horses come to the UK, I think as the trainers and connections get better at managing and training them, the races are becoming better and better. I think the quality of horses that have been selected to come over in the last few years has been better. They've had less soundness issues. More and more of them have hit the track. And, they're good races. And I wanted to do something to be able to give them something to go for, a series for them to be able to go for. So I devised it. Obviously, I devised it in January for the main season. And then when we decided that the stars sort of aligned really, because we were sort of and ahhing, shall we race in the winter, shall we not? I wanted to extend the season because people, for the horse owners and for trainers, because they'd lost a section of the season. Obviously, we had the bookmakers in the background. I just fancied a few Sundays basically to see whether we could get it out there and get into the bookmakers. And then of course the lights went out before the Crock of Gold, and I was determined to run that race. So it was a case of, well, if we're going to do one, we might as well do a few. And I said, right, okay. Adam approved it, and I turned around and said, right, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to do the Trot of Gold. Came up with the Tir Prince Star Makers. Which you were right in your blog. It probably wasn't the best name for it, to be honest with you.
You noticed that bit, did you?
Yeah. Well, no, but you to be honest, you weren't the first person that had said it. But I wanted something that would grab people's attention, and I think it worked in that point of view.
The series was absolutely fantastic. It was.
Yeah.
It was. And the naming of it is neither here nor there really.
No.
It was the content. You talk about the substance of the actual series,
and
that could not
have
been better, really.
No. Well, I decided we wanted to do the Trot of Gold, which that idea had been sitting on the shelf for a while. So that was no problem. And then obviously, I mean, I came up with the conditions on a car journey home from a BHRC meeting with Jim McAnally for the original Star Makers. He had the name, and the concept of the original Star Makers series was people are spending all these money on stakes horses. The majority of them don't make it. Yeah. And when they get to 4, I wanted my idea for the original Stormmakers. When they get to 4, they should still have the chance to run for decent money, so that the connections can keep them and make career horses out of them. So that was the original for that. So when I looked at the pool of horses that we had left racing in this autumn, and I looked because obviously York had a lot of races, we'd had a lot of races, but we hadn't had many handicap races because, as you've rightly pointed out, we'd been snowed under with stakes races. So I looked at Corby Wood, Ammon Valley and York, and because the prize money had been quite depressed really because of COVID-19 compared to other years, I thought, right, I didn't want horses to go in there that had already been winning a load of races. Do you see what I mean? And because some of the prize money had been lower than usual, there was horses in there that had won a few races that they would have stood out had they been able to go in. So that's where I came up with £1,000 from. So I looked at the figures and I thought horses that haven't won £1,000 in 2020 season. I was aware of the fact that it was going to include the likes of Miraculous and Reed's Passion. But I thought, well, if I did them as preferred, it would make it quite interesting. And it did, to be fair. It did I think I got 26 entered for it initially. And, when I seen, oh God, some of the grade ones that had entered and then saw Miraculous, I thought, right, how am I going to do this? And I quickly said, well, I'll just put a consolation final on. And obviously they moved up and down and it worked well. It certainly got away with it in some respects. And I think, can you imagine what you could do with, are we losing you there?
No, I'm still here. I'm listening.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you froze for a minute then.
Yeah, I just sat very, very still. I was thinking there about, talking about Miraculous and the preferred racing and the layout of the races and had it not worked, Miraculous would have won every division or every heat that he ran in and the final, and that's not happened. So it's even though on paper some people might have been scratching their heads saying, well, this is never going to work. Ultimately it did.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I think, can you imagine what you could do? That was with a pool of sort of 20 horses, putting them up and down. Can you imagine what you could do with a pool of 70 horses if the winners were coming up and the losers were coming down every week with normal handicap racing? That basically was what I was trying to demonstrate, that if you allow these horses to come up and down in like that you can put good racing on every week. So we moved on, did the Stormakers, and I loved it. They were, I mean, you came to most of their meetings, Sarah. They were, what did you think?
I really enjoyed them. I'll be honest, I did really enjoy. I think I definitely missed the first week. I think I missed the second week and I caught the third week of them. And then obviously I definitely caught the final and the consolation.
Yeah.
I love a series in general. The concept of a series to me is something I really enjoy. It's why I created the Mare series at Corby Wood. It's why I've tried to create other series, whether they're driver series or their horses series. I like a series. I like something that builds. I like heats and finals. This is ultimately this is where it comes from.
Of course. The
difference with the series is bringing it out that little bit further. It's not just on one day. If you've got a track that is running on a weekly, fortnightly basis, you can build it and build it and build it. And in a normal year, when you've got a crowd through, and a crowd that comes back every time, people start to follow. It gains momentum. Everyone kind of just gets caught up in those sorts of things. And although we didn't have a crowd, at the time the Star Maker series was being run, it gains momentum. You get people following. This is why the Crocker Gold historically has always worked so well. Is because you're building.
Of course, brilliant,
up to the point at which it reaches its culmination. So as a concept, it was great. And like I say, on paper, people might have said, oh, this is never going to work because you've got Miraculous in there, you've got Reed's Passion.
They were looking at the actual handicap system thinking, oh, these numbers don't fit.
But numbers aren't horses. That's not how racing works.
That's right.
Air Eagle's another one, and I definitely mentioned him in my blog. Him and Stephen Lee's one. at the time, maybe when they entered that horse, they thought Stephen's going to get 3 wins on the bounce here because it's going to be full of horses that are, haven't been season, they're lower in the handicap system. That's not how these things transpired. Took miraculous until the final win, and the springboard that gave him then for the following week's racing was incredible. But something like that for next year, like you say, with a bigger pool of horses.
With a bigger pool of horses, definitely. See, what I was trying to achieve with that was, I mean, I'll give you an example of a horse there, Enter the Dragon, Melanie Langford's, there's a horse that can go 2-2 round Tir Prince, probably 2-1, but he'll go 2-2 on a bad day every day of the week. Reed Star Quality, 2-minute horse, Air Eagle, 2-minute horse. And I just wanted to put something to allow these horses to be able to race competitively every week. And if you've got Air Eagle, for example, who's a 2-minute horse all day long, well, if Nancy Camden on the inside of him can go 2-3, then I think it's a fair match for one to be drawn 1 and one to be drawn 8 if you want to see a good race. Just that was the concept, and the concept was, I think it's a shame that obviously stakes racing is great. I'm a massive fan of it, and we hold a lot of stakes races, but you need to be careful when you get into the stage that the consumers in the sport, the owners, the people who are paying the bills every week, are starting to sell horses out of the sport that can go 2-1, 2-2 to take on a yearling that might not be able to go 2-14. Once you start doing that, if you've got a horse that's able to go 2-1, 2-2, even 2-3 around Tir Prince every day of the week, it's sound. It's doing the job it's been bred to do. It's enjoying the job it's been bred to do. If them horses are being sold out of our sport because there's no racing for them, then we're doing something wrong. And I think that was my thoughts. That was the thinking behind the Star Makers, to say, hang on, the pendulum has swung a bit too far here now. We need to start putting something back on for these handicap horses to make sure that, because at the end of the day, they should be running until, when a handicap horse is 7-8, it should be in its prime. Shouldn't be getting ready to be retired. It should be in its prime. Even if it's high up the grade, it should be able to come back down, and it should be worth something. If you've got a horse that is, whatever the handicap system is going to be next year, but if you've got a horse that's at the equivalent of a grade 8, for example, which is sort of 2/3 of the way, 80% of the handicap, whatever you want to call it, and it's a 2-minute horse, that horse should be worth money. It shouldn't be one that you're having to give away or to sell to another organisation. And I think that was the thinking behind the Star Makers. And by having more meetings at Tir Prince next year, and no doubt other tracks will have more meetings as well, if we can get the handicapping racing back up and running, then I think that'll work. And I think the sell-on value of horses should keep their value, because there should be plenty of racing for them.
Yeah, and you've touched upon it. It makes a great spectacle. It really does. Some of the finishes we saw at Tir Prince in that autumn series of racing they were absolutely fantastic. Nightmare for me, but as a fan of just watching racing, when you're watching 3-5 horses come at a line together, because they call it the handicapper's dream, but ultimately. It's fallen on you as the racing manager really to create series and races that have allowed for those finishes to happen. It's not really the handicapper's dream at all. It's you putting into practice what you've had in your mind, what you want a race to kind of look like, and it's worked. And obviously we've touched upon there, looking at the Star Maker series or a similar series or similar styles of handicap races for next year. But before we move on to 2021 in general, just want to kind of rewind a little bit before we get to that point. I don't know which way to go here. I've got 2 options. We've got, we'll go Crock of Gold, original and rerun, or we go Green Hornet first. So you take your pick.
I think go Crock of Gold first, because we finished with the green. Go Crock of Gold first.
Okay, you go Crock of Gold first. So Crock of Gold, original Crock of Gold night, middle of September. We had crowds at that point. We were still allowing
crowds. Yeah.
It was quite a big night. It was a busy night. There was a hype, built up around it because we were looking at a really, really strong free for all to top the card. That great supporting races as well leading up to it. We had a really good night.
Amazing.
I mean, I've got to talk.
I remember looking at the. Yeah, go on. Sorry, go on. Yeah, go on.
Before you, I've got to get it in now in case you don't ask me what my highlight of the 2020 season was at Tir Prince. But it was that night. It was that night, and it was the Anto Russell Memorial. Obviously, we didn't get the Anto Russell meeting at the start of the season, but that Memorial race there was that is personally my highlight. Was Air Paparazzi winning that race, 158.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Just what a performance that night, and to be fair, that was the night that was the race that the floodlights went out. Partway through the race, so there was all the kind of added drama that went with it as well. Ended up being the fastest race of the night because the Cropper World wasn't running. So so I had to shoehorn that in because connections probably.
Sarah, you might be able to tell me this. Was that the fastest time done at Tir Prince all season?
No, I don't think it was.
What do you think went quicker? I think it was the fastest time of the season. I can't remember anything else going under 159.
What about Newtown Jodie? What time did she go? Did she go a sub 58 mile or not? Did you have any 150?
I don't think she did.
I mean, this is difficult for me because I don't really retain information very well. It's been a long week. I'm on my second gym.
Yeah. Well, we can come back to that. It's not a quiz, but I'm pretty certain. Just thinking about it now. Well, if you start with the free for all races, Colford Tech won a free for all, didn't go under 59. The as it was the rerun Crocker or the rescheduled Crocker Gold final didn't go that time. Obviously the British Pacing Classic's over 1.25 miles anyway. I'm not sure what time Jodie went in the senior Dragon. Which would have been
159 and 2. Here we go. So hang on, let me just zoom in on my eyesight's appalling. She went Breeders' Crown. She went 157 and 5.
There you go. So you were right. Yeah, your gut feeling was right. So that's the difference. So yeah.
I feel like I've had this conversation with somebody, whether it was John, whether it's been Hugh O'Neill or somebody. About Paparazzi, whether it was even Joseph. I felt like I've had this conversation with somebody, in the back of my mind that something that had gone faster. But
Joseph might well have asked you about it because I think I might have said to Joseph that I thought he was the fastest. So that it might come that way around.
Yeah, if he was the one that asked me, then you were the one that planted the seed.
Yeah. So there we go.
You built it.
So anyway,
up, Eric.
I did. Yeah. Well, yeah, he was the fastest gelding. Fastest colt or gelding.
Because then don't do that because that means I've got to go back through and look for another horse that maybe went faster than 158 and won now. But no, that was it. Like I say, it was a great supporting card that night. That was a good race, and obviously Dean Russell was over, with the family as well. There was people there to actually be part of the race. Obviously, we staged Corbywood and Dean couldn't be there. It's nice for the sponsors to actually be involved, and obviously because weren't racing behind closed doors at that point. Like it wasn't strict behind closed doors. They were able to attend that meeting. Quite nice as well.
No, it was good, and I can remember it was a busy night. It was the most races we had in any night that year. I think we had 9 races scheduled for that night. The Anto Russell was the 8th race, and we'd had a few hiccups. We had the police visitors in the daytime, asking what was going on. And we'd had authority to race. They come to do a little check, and it was quite high pressure night, phoning the results through to the press association, getting everything done, and it was quite a nice warm night. I remember looking out the box just before the Anto Russell, and I thought, get this done, one more race, and what a good night it's been.
Then you can
and then in the back straight, and and then in the back straight, obviously. In the back straight for the second time, the floodlights went out. So that was interesting. Well, it was panic stations, and it had been such a good night's racing that it wasn't. How can I say? Look, it was disappointing. I remember coming to the winners' enclosure afterwards, and you just looked at me and just went, "I don't think you." I don't think you knew
I was
what to say or what
lost.
to do. It
I
was,
was
yeah,
completely
it was
lost at that
just like,
point.
yeah. And but it was like, it was weird. I think it was only when I got home afterwards. I came home quite soon after the racing that night, and I was just sat down. I was like, I can't believe that's happened. So it was like absolutely thrilled. You're still on a high after a night's racing like that. And like I say, Joseph's performance on Paparazzi was fantastic. And it was weird just to have that bit, that last race taken away. And
Yeah.
but I made my mind up. I made my mind up that race was going to be run that night. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, sometimes don't you? And I come and I thought that final is going ahead. I'm running that race because obviously it's Adam's dad's race. The gentleman that built the track put everything into building the track. It's Crocker Gold's our signature race. So I was determined to run it because some people from within the sport said that they thought we shouldn't run it, but I always thought that we should. And from the meeting that we had on the 1st of November, after that, I think we were right, really.
Oh,
I think we were
definitely.
right because,
I don't feel from my perspective, I don't feel that Tir Prince's season would have been complete without something resembling a Crock of Gold. And
right.
to be honest, just a normal free for all wasn't going to really do it. It had to be. There's so much attached to the name of the race. It is what it represents. And I think if you'd neglected to run that race, it would have been a bit kind of a lackluster finish to it. The season to me
I think
felt
so.
incomplete.
Yeah.
I felt like the race needed to be run after everything that happened in the middle of September. It needed to be run, and I know there were certain horses that couldn't be part of the rerun. And there were horses that, whether it was because they went to North America or their seasons ended for one reason, but it opened the door up for other horses to come in that hit a really good patch of form. In the weeks leading up, for example, Cash All. The race was different to what being the Crocodile final was different to what was scheduled for September. But the build up to it and the event that it turned out to be, I thought was kind of the perfect ending to it.
It was
the way it panned
I
out.
thought so as well. And it was very 2020, wasn't it? Crocker Gold final run on a Sunday in November. And one day, when we no crowd. When we're looking back on this, we'll be, oh yeah, I remember 20.
Yeah, 2020.
It was just
weird year.
It was a strange year that, But the caliber of the horses that ran in the race were good. Fantastic. I think, in fairness, obviously, Merrington moving up was a late scratching, concerns over the ground. Completely accepted that. Rocky Mambo. To be fair to Mark Jones, I mean, Mark and Jenny, you know them as well. They're lovely people, aren't they? And they're always very honest. And if you ask Mark a question, he'll tell you the truth. And he'd said to me on the build up to it, I'd phoned up and done a few things for the stream, and he said he thought he'd gone over the top a little bit. Obviously, Cash Hall had come out of nowhere, really. Not being rude by saying that, but unbelievable the performances, and parachuted himself into the race. Paparazzi. I know Joseph Riley phoned me up the Sunday after he'd won the Anto Russell, so I knew it was on their radar, and I was delighted for them to be in it. And obviously, Miraculous had managed to get himself in the winners' enclosure the week before, and again, a little bit of an antidote, so to speak. When obviously Miraculous was caught in the straight 3 times at Tir Prince this year. We had a little meeting on the Tuesday in July, and I put a high grade open for 3rd race on as the last race. Miraculous kicked in the back straight, and you just thought, this is all over. He was favourite, and he got nabbed. Lakeside Paddy come and nabbed him.
And that was a great finish that day as well.
Great finish, yeah. And you just thought to yourself, oh, well, he's just been done there, but he should have won. Miraculous should be winning that. And then he comes back then, and he races in the first heat of the Star Makers. And he kicks again, and turning for home, he's won. And his stablemate Reed's Passion runs him down, mows him down in the straight. I'm only talking about myself personally and nobody else, but I start to think he's not seeing these races out. And then, lo and behold, the week after, or a couple of weeks after, he actually ran a really big race in the 2nd heat. He had a murderous trip and finished third.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty certain he had a murderous trip and finished third in the second of the 3 heats. And then in the third heat, he gets collared in the straight again. That's it. He had a murderous trip and finished third. The heat Air Pioneer won when he come widest of all, and Air Pioneer come out peekaboo, won the final, won the heat. But in the third heat, he hit the front again, and this time Wellfield Warlock come and done him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I don't know about this, and I actually said to Richard Haytham, I think I put it in my form guide anyway. I don't think I said it to him, but I put it in my form guide that Miraculous needed a bit of cover. Anyway, Richard promptly won the Star Makers by leading from pillar to post. So when he was in the winners' enclosure after the race, I said, tongue in cheek, I said, I told you he needed covering up. But which he laughed. But to be fair, in the Crocker Gold final, he did cover him up, didn't he?
Exactly what he did.
And he finished like a lion.
Yeah. I genuinely, and I wrote about this in my blog, I just felt that sometimes a horse can go a long time without winning. And I do believe, and maybe it is just me, although John says he agrees with me, and I don't know if that's out of fear or genuinely because he does. I believe that these things get to a horse mentally. I believe horses think. They're far too clever animals to not think and to not take in what's happening. And I think if you're the level that Miraculous has raced at for so long now, those defeats once they start mounting up and mounting up and mounting up, I believe have a negative impact on that horse's mentality going into a race. And the day that he won the Star Makers, I noticed this, and I didn't. To me, when he won that race, he wasn't finishing as strong as when I look back at the day he dead heated in the Crocker Gold, even with Son of a Gun, where he ran right to the line. For me, when Miraculous was on that home straight, his head was starting to bob and weave, and to me, he looked like a horse looking for a way of kind of stopping a little bit, because he was just like,
of course.
And obviously in the races preceding that, which I hadn't seen in the flesh, that seemed to be what had been happening, was he was getting at the line.
There's an air of inevitability about it, wasn't there? I'm going to get chinned again here.
To me, he just felt like a horse that he wasn't looking at the line and saying, I've got this. There was something about him, and he hung on that day. And I don't know whether, and like I say, I wrote about it in my blog, I don't know whether the act of coming back round to the winner's circle, not just to pick up a rosette and go shooting off the track again, but the act of coming back, having your cart taken off, or, people coming over, putting a rug over you, or putting a rosette on, standing for a photo, or all the kind of stuff that happens after a race. And I know, as a horse owner, I'm always patting my horses and they're getting a cap.
No, I know what you're saying though.
That moment, whether that triggered something, whether, it was just enough, but completely different drive in the Crocker Gold from Richard, completely different drive. And maybe ultimately, maybe that was all the horse really needed anyway. Maybe if he'd been driven like preceding, he would have won those races, who knows? But he raced the line a different horse for me in the Crocker Gold than he did the week before in the Star Makers.
Of course he does. They're athletes, aren't they? Yeah. They're athletes, at the end of the day. I think that I touched on it with Vicky Gill earlier on when she led out with Newtown Jody, and you start making decisions on instinct, and I think racehorses are the same. If he's won the week before, all of a sudden, he's doing something again. He's relaxed, doing it naturally. Bang! I'm back winning a race. He's back in the groove. That's what form is in any sport. Whether or not you're a tennis player, cricket player, snooker player, you can come in and out of form. The fact that Miraculous competes, until he went in the Star Makers, competes at the very, very top level every week, week in, week out, means you've got no margin for error.
No.
When you're at that top level, what the Star Makers allowed him to do was have a margin for error and to find his feet and think, do you know what? I can win races.
Yeah.
I'm good enough to win a race. And as soon as he knew that, he was able to come out the week after, go back into that top level and win. And I think that's what listen, the last thing we need to do now is to start talking about handicapping, because we will be here till midnight.
No, I think
our handicaps, that's what a handicap system is. It needs to allow horses to come in and go out of form. When they go out of form, they need to be able to come down. And when they go back into form, they go back up. That's how we get competitive racing.
Yeah. And ultimately what you did at Tir Prince was to essentially recreate that scenario, was to allow Miraculous to drop down into a slightly easier caliber of competition few weeks, albeit with the worst draws, and admittedly him not winning, but being placed regularly, and build his way back up and build confidence back up. And like you say, step back then to a Group 1, on his last start of the season as it transpired. And I actually said to Richard afterwards, are you going to race this horse next week on the 8th? Because I know at the time you'd contemplated
trying to get a free for all. Yeah.
I said to Richard, let him finished, or would you come back? Because I know it's been a long season, but when you've got horses bouncing into that kind of form, you kind of maybe want to keep going a little bit. But we knew the season was coming to an end at that point anyway. So,
of course,
kind of thought to themselves, let's go out on a high this year and regroup and maybe come back next year with and try and go for these sorts of things again. But it was nice to have him step back up, and it meant a lot to Connections. And I know I spoke to Darren when I did the review afterwards for the live stream, and kind of said it was nice that Miraculous and Evil Son of Gun, the day they dead heated the Crock of Gold, is one of my favourite Crock of Golds. It was such a finish. Even with Son of a Gun to have gone on and won his own Crock of Gold outright was great for him and his Connections. But for Miraculous, after a couple of seasons where he struggled to find the winner's circle, to then bounce back and win his Crock of Gold outright, I could completely understand where Alan Dickinson was coming from with the tears at that point, because it's such a lovely story. There's something,
of course it is,
something about being a dual Crock of Gold winner that's impressive in itself. But it's the comeback kings, Porto Stars.
Of course it is.
Right, the horses that win it don't win it but compete in it. They lose that title and they claw their way back and they win it again. Those feel, you can understand at that point. Then it's not just the quality of the race that the Connections have won; it's the manner in which they. And that was summed up by Alan Dickinson that day with the tears. Sally was all smiles.
Definitely.
He had a bit of dirt in his eye, and it definitely wasn't tears, but it was.
No.
It was a really, really good race, and like I said to you earlier, it was. I'm glad we got the chance to see it and allow it to kind of play out the way it did.
Definitely, it was. I was pleased that we took the decision that we did, and like you say, it couldn't have gone any better, really, to be quite honest with you, in terms of the way it panned out. And I agree with you, in terms of when they dead heated that day, even with Son of a Gun and Miraculous, their fortunes were destined to be almost polar opposites afterwards. But it was great that Miraculous, who's still only a young horse, was able to come back. Now he's a Group 1 winner again, and I look forward to seeing him next year.
Yeah, me too.
I look forward to seeing him next year.
And then the last subject of 2020, before we do move on to a quick kind of roundup of what's happening next year, some feature events, we must talk about the Green Hornet heats and final, the handicap.
Yeah, that was, I must mention, we got some colours via Watson Harrop of Yannick Gingras. The harness racing community put their hand in the pocket and we raffled them. Shane Fletcher won them. So we managed to raise a couple of grand, basically, to go into a prize fund. So I put the heats on the 1st of November, same day as the Crock Gold final, and it was 60 quid to enter the heat. But you were basically guaranteed, if you won your heat, you qualified for the final. And then I did it on the fastest losers, because they were preferred. I did it on the fastest losers. And what it basically meant was that the winner of the lower heat, the winner of the lower grade heat qualified. And then all of the other horses came out of the high grade heat, and all of the horses who finished second and downwards in the lower grade heat got to run in the consolation race. And there was no entry fee for either of the finals. So I made it attractive for them because they got 2 races for 60 quid. One was a 2 grand final, one was 500 quid to the winner. So it was good value for them as it goes. And I've mentioned time a couple of times earlier on, and quite big on a hard track at Tir Prince. If horses are racing every week, then I can handicap on time.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Obviously, having a national handicapping system on time with the variances of the tracks that we've got and the different surfaces that we've got, it's a no-go. But when you're racing every week at Tir Prince, racing on time makes perfect sense. And, there was nobody more pleased than me than when all them 4 horses went over the line together in the Green Hornet final.
I was the least pleased. Can I just point that out? Pleased to everybody there about that finish. Apart from the one good shot I got, which everyone says is fantastic, but that was pure luck.
Oh, it's a great shot. Great
nothing
shot.
Worse. The only thing that could have been worse than that finish was if there'd been 5 or 6 of them crossing the line together. That's terrible. But as a spectator, you get that. Like I'm in two minds when I'm doing that job. There's part of me that is watching to get the photo, and there's part of me that is watching the race. And the part of me that's watching the race, what a finish that was. It was absolutely.
It was.
When I called it, Mandy and me called it differently. I'm standing at a bad angle. I always know I'm standing at a bad angle. My photos give a false image of what horses won the race, and I actually called side Paddy. But I think Mandy had called their Pioneer. It was close. I was trying to allow for, you know, the angle that I was standing.
You've only got to be stood 6 inches the wrong way, and it throws a concept. Because where you stand, I've stood there for years, but obviously now that I've gone up into the commentary box doing, you know, sending the results stuff and through like that, it's completely different. When you're at trackside like that, I could very rarely get one right when I was at trackside. To be honest with you, if you stood, because I'd always like to stand too far one way of the finish line, and I used to find it. They used to call it wrong all the time. Oh, that's one. But when you're up, you know, up in the crow's nest, so to speak, it was good. But going forwards, you know, if we have regular racing at Tir Prince, certainly the handicap horses, don't be surprised to be a few races handicapped on time, really, you know, when they're in around that, because I think it made for a good spectacle. And you know,
really
I was pleased with it.
It was the kind of, for the build up that went into it, you know, a finish that was worthy of, you know, how the event was kind of built up. Obviously, we had Yannick on the Sulky show a couple of weeks ago,
Brilliant.
Or you know, the weekend before, 2 nights before, whenever it was, just to talk about it and that build up that went into it. And at that point in the season, Tir Prince was the only track that was running anyway. So
we were on the crest of a wave, weren't we?
You were getting the full focus as well of the country. Kind of, that's what everyone was sort of watching and talking about. And we had the build up on social media with the polls and stuff like that. And it definitely, that turned out to be the final that you would have hoped for, I'd imagine, when you set out to create that.
Definitely. Do you know what?
Couldn't have worked out
really
better,
enjoyed it. No, and you know when you've enjoyed it, because I didn't want it to finish.
Yeah.
You know, the season, I remember sort of lying awake around about, it was just before the heats of the, you know, just before the night of the Crocker Gold final. And I thought, I knew in my heart of hearts, I thought, we might struggle to get this to go past the 8th. I could see the population dwindling. I was gutted, you know, and I'll be honest with you, you know, usually you get to Crocker Gold night after 7 meetings of the racing and you're ready for it to finish, you know, because, you know, you can get a lot of hassle with it. I really enjoyed them Sundays. Really enjoyed them Sundays. Enjoyed the racing, enjoyed the concept of it, and give me a real appetite really to try and put weekly racing on where possible. And give me an appetite. I mean, I've spoken for a long time to Adam about the possibility of putting a winter series on, and I've always liked the idea of doing it on a Sunday. And I think, do you know what? You know, if you can imagine if COVID hadn't have been going, you were there, Sarah. We were bloody lucky with the weather, weren't we? To be fair.
Oh, massively, you know, especially the start of that day. I turned up with no waterproofs, even though Adam told me the week before, bring your waterproofs no matter what. Still managed to turn up with no waterproofs. Massive rain shower at the start of the day, and then just like brilliantly. And probably now,
so
you get to this time of year now, and you're starting to struggle a little bit with the weather. But I think it's difficult because I think I've spoken to a few people about it, and we got to that second week in November, and people are starting to turn out because people are so used to finishing before then.
Of course they are.
People get into a routine. I know myself that in normal years, middle of November, we're looking to go on holiday for 4 or 5 days. City.
Of course. Yeah.
That's the cutoff point for us. You know, and other people are, you know, people are ready to start turning horses and stuff. But maybe if you start, you know, just pushing on a week or a fortnight or 3 weeks later previous season, before you know it, you've coaxed people into this concept of winter racing.
Of course you have, yeah.
You can't just do it overnight. You can't just get people to race right up to Christmas, having finished previously at the start of October. You've kind of, you know, it's baby steps sometimes to get people used to the idea of pushing on that bit further.
Of course it is, but I think you were there, and well, obviously we haven't rehearsed this, so I don't know what you're going to say, but I thought that, you know, those Sunday afternoons, I thought they had quite a nice feel to them, and you can imagine if the public had been allowed to attend, and we had been able to allow the bar open, and you know they could have had the screens on in the bar TV. I think it makes for quite a nice afternoon. You know, 6 or 7 races, and I think that had we been able to have the crowds in, I think we could have got a few people there. To be honest with you,
Yeah.
I think we could have got a few people there. So it's something that is definitely we're definitely looking at it for next year. And I think if people are forewarned a little bit, you know, because you know, people like yourselves, for example, if you've got a few horses and you might turn around and go, do you know what? Don't bring him in. Don't bring that one in until the end of June. We'll race. We'll start at the beginning of October, and we'll give him 6 or 7 races at Tir Prince at the end of the season. That's the hope, and then people can be more organised. Then
you can plan it and split it. You can, you know,
of course you can.
If you know in advance that's what's happening, definitely. Particularly with, you know, I don't really race stakes horses, so it is handicap horses. If I could plan a season where I can kind of focus on 1 or 2 at a certain point, maybe even take a break. One of them, bring a fresh one in, and then bring in one of my early ones later on into the season. That maybe would actually some people. So it's definitely a concept worth worth pursuing.
Yeah. Especially the hope is that you know, we can make it worth people's while, basically. You know, I mean, we don't want to, you know, it's don't appear to be, you know, constantly saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But I know what it costs to have a horse in training. You know, I know exactly what it costs to have a horse in training. I know how much diesel costs. So, you know, if we can undertake to say, listen, there's going to be some decent prize money on offer for you in our autumn series. We've put it aside, we've raised it, we've got it out, you know, we've got it out of the coffers. This is what it's going to be. You know, you can, like I say, you can aim for it. I know that Alan Athenwaite was one professional trainer that I've spoken to, and John Gill was another, and they both said, Eric, had we have known that this was definitely going to happen, then we would have made provisions for it. So we'll listen. We'll see. We'll see, won't we?
And we're getting towards the end of this now. We have alluded to the 2020 season. We talk of that.
We have
autumn series and other races as well. Though, I mean, we should really touch upon what's coming up in 2021. Not every meeting by meeting. I know you've put in for more dates, etc.
No.
These are still to be dealt with by the BHRC. But in terms of features, can you just give us a kind of a quick overview of?
Of course, yeah, no problem. Yeah, we're looking at it in two parts again, basically. Well, the dates that I've put in for spring. I've cordoned spring. So the spring meetings will start first weekend in May. The highlight of that will be the Anto Russell. You know, we had 1 race in Dean's brother's name last year. This year we're going back for the big heat and final. Big prize money, free for all trot. Start with a real bang. Everything else within that spring series will be what I would class as a meeting for, you know, normal racing, basically, to try and cater for people. 6, 7 races at most. Dates and times to be agreed. I have put some dates in, but that's all to be sorted out. So then going into the summer, you know, which you're talking sort of late June, July, August, you know, you're going to be looking. I'll look to run the North Wales races again. Potentially there's another event that I'm looking at in July, and then we've got we'll look to hold looking at putting the British Pacing Classic somewhere in probably around July time, and then the Breeders' Crown in the August bank holiday weekend. That would be the plan for there again. So they would be the main events. You're in your key stakes races, then, Sarah, aren't you? Really, you know, June, July, August. Knock off all the stakes races. Put them in the best positions that we possibly can, in agreements with the other tracks, so that we're not killing the horses. And then put as many other meetings in as we can amongst them for your handicappers and for your maidens and for your trotters. Again, 6, 7 races. I think that one thing that I want to get away from is, yes, you have your big nights, 8, 9 races. I think once you start going above 8 or 9 races, it's not enjoyable for your stewards. It's not enjoyable for the participants. The punters lose interest. You're wasting your product, basically. And I think certainly as a product, as a sport, especially with the streaming now, let's not forget we've got the streaming now. So it's not as important as it has been in the past to say, oh, well, actually, that track's running on that day. Well, we don't want them to run on that day because they won't get the people through the gate. People can't get there and they can't make it pay and all the rest of it. To be honest with you, if I'm streaming and I can put 6 competitive races on and you're starting at 2 and I'm starting at 7, I'm not going to object. You know, simple as that. You know, that's I think it can work because your punters can go there, watch your racing, and your stewards, and you can go there and you can watch the stream. That's the hope. You know, I think if I'm sensible about the number of races that I want to hold on the more run-of-the-mill meetings, I think it can work. I don't. It might be a bit of a dash for the photographer, but we'll have to see.
But alluding to the fact that I am still the photographer for next year.
Yeah.
It's on record.
You've still got that job.
There we go. It's on record now. Everyone who watches this knows.
Yeah.
Hold you to that.
That's it. It's August bank holiday weekend. I'm the big Breeders' Crown night, and obviously, we've got the VDM booked in for the 14th and 15th of August.
My birthday weekend. Woohoo!
Thrilled with. Is it really?
My birthday. The VDM always falls around my birthday. It's never. I mean, it has fallen on my birthday in previous years, but I've never made it to Portmarnock for it. And at some point, if it stays at Tir Prince for the next few years, at some point my birthday is going to wind up being the weekend of the VDM.
Bang smack on it. Yeah.
So you get a different photographer. I'll be in the bar.
So listen, absolutely thrilled. Derek and James, both friends of mine. I've been over to the VDM plenty of times, keeping in contact with them. Use their stallion plenty. That we're friends. And when the opportunity came up, it was something that I was really interested in doing. We've had extensive conversations. They're really serious about this in terms of how they do it. They're quite hard taskmasters. They know what they want. They know exactly what they want and how they want it. And believe you me, it hasn't been a case of them just saying, "Oh, do you want the VDM, Eric? Yeah, you can have it." There's a lot of conversations gone into it. There's a lot, and we're gonna. I made it clear at the outset. Look, I've had some fantastic times at the Portmarnock for the VDM. Yeah, I've really had some good times over there, and I think it's going to be different at Tir Prince. You have to accept the fact that it's coming to Wales and it's going to be different. But I think we can take it in a new direction, and I think we can make it absolutely fantastic. North Wales is getting coverage all over the world now as a tourism destination. I think we can make it special for the international visitors. I don't think they'll be disappointed. We can show them a little bit of our heritage. And I think, in terms of the racing, we can really make it spectacular. So there's a lot of work to go into that. There's probably going to be a couple of little committees set up. I'm going to have to delegate some jobs on that, definitely. My main priority for the time being has been getting accommodation, because you have to realise that it is the busiest period of the year in North Wales.
In general.
COVID-19 on top. Yeah. In general, every year anyway. Put COVID-19 on top of that. People can't, the majority of people still aren't certain about going abroad, which makes it even busier. So my main priority for the time being has been securing accommodation, and I've done that. I mean, I've booked the whole Kimmel Manor hotel. That's done. I've made another huge booking for some of the international visitors who are going to stay in a really nice 4-star hotel in Llandudno. Beautiful Victorian seaside town. I think they'll enjoy it there. And I've also made extensive bookings at a holiday park as well. But I also know that those are the bookings that I've taken care of. I know that the local Premier Inn is full already, full of trotting people. Oriel House. It's gonna be big.
It's a massive. Think about it outside of the racing. It's a massive boost for the local economy. Just, you know, in
it's going to
terms
be
of,
big.
you know,
Yeah.
accommodation, places to eat, you know,
Yeah.
carriages, people fueling up to, you know, get back and stuff like that. It's incredible. You know, the local shop, and people need a bottle of Lucozade the morning after a very heavy night before.
Yeah.
Or Mountain Dew. If I can find a shop that sells Mountain Dew in, you know, a 10-mile radius of Tir Prince, that'd be really, really handy, because I couldn't find it the last time. As long as my hotel room is booked, that's all I really care about. I think I was one of the
it's booked.
I think I was one of the first people on to. I was like, I'm the photographer.
Yeah.
I've got a room, and I was like, just two things: am I still a photographer? Have I got the room? And the answer is yes to both.
Yeah.
All's good on that front.
Yeah.
But no, that should
so
be.
we're looking forward to that. That's going to be there's going to be doing a lot of work on that. Like I said, my main priority has been the accommodation. Got that sorted now. Got a raffle, the Always Be Mickey raffle, you know, and that's donated by Diamond Creek Farms and Oakwood Stud, the Delaney's. You know, that's going to be nearly £9,000 thrown straight into the prize fund for that weekend. And there's more coming. There's more coming. There's a lot going to go into that. So, but you know, I've also given assurances to David Wilson for with the Breeders' Crown that the same level of intensity and effort is going to go into that. So yeah, it's going to be a busy period.
You're earning your next year. Your wages next year. They're hard earned, is what we're saying.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt.
you're putting even more effort in. And then obviously we move on after that's the summer series. We move on to the autumn again.
That's the summer series. Go into the autumn series. Then obviously the Crock of Gold. We'll have the Crock of Gold, and then September and sort of October-ish we'll count as the autumn series, and then winter I've put in for dates right till the end of November. As well, you know, with the Sunday afternoons and see how we go. And there'll be the concept there will be some series is basically similar to the Tir Prince Star Makers. There'll be series for handicaps horses, series for the trotters at that time of year, and I'll play about with a few things next year. If these dates come off, you know, I think that there's a few things that can be done even with maidens and things like that. You know, if you look at the pool of horses and study it, I'm confident that I can put a few things together to make it attractive for them to enter, to be able to put good racing on. So yeah, we will see how we go. But I'm already looking forward to it.
Oh, but after tonight, I'm already looking forward to it now as well. It's you've sold it to me, and I imagine everybody watching this will be sitting back and saying, right, well, this sounds like something to plan for. So, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how this all kind of pans out. You know,
of course,
plans versus reality sometimes don't always match up.
Of course.
But
yeah.
Some things work out and some things need a little bit of tinkering. You know, you can still call it a success, as what you would call 2020 was a success really under the circumstances. So, you know, we look forward to seeing how the date situation pans out, you know, for Tir Prince and obviously the tracks as well, because, you know,
of course, yeah,
it all depends as well that, you know, the world situation. Are we going to find ourselves? Are we going to find ourselves in a situation here again next year where we don't have some of these grass meetings? Who knows at this point? You know, and obviously the hard track.
It's impossible to say.
Save the season really for us. So, you know,
that's right.
It could be the next year we're looking at another season of hard track racing again, but it's play it by ear. But obviously, it sounds like you've got a load of ideas. You've got, you know, you've got recurring events that you've got planned and set into the calendar to start with, and then obviously the addition of new events like the VDM as well, and just ideas that you can build on. So I'm looking forward to 2021 for Tir Prince.
Brilliant. Yeah, so am I. It won't be long. It'll be here sooner than you think. Believe you me.
Time to get horses back in training shortly after Christmas, I imagine, for most people, self included.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, because you'll have a few round you now, Sarah.
Oh, well, I have been collecting. I have been shopping recently. I think I'll be honest. I think what happened was, you know, we trained horses at the start of the season. And COVID, the way things were panning out, and just a couple of little niggling issues with them, we just said, no, let's finish up. We don't think this season is going to go ahead. At the start of March, we're like, this is not going to happen. What harm for the horses that we're training as handicappers is another season, you know, it's a year off going to really make. So we come up with that. And then, do you know what, as the season persevered and we got racing, I've never felt such an insane jealousy of the enjoyment that people were getting from racing horses, and I know John felt the same, and that's how the newest additions came to it. It was so much a case of, I like this horse, let's buy it, we'll just race it next. And that is kind of, we're looking forward to 2021 now. Whether it pans out how we want it to is another matter, but that's life in general.
Hey, look, listen, you've got to be in it to win it, haven't you? You've got to be in it to win it. And I think, listen, if we raced in 2020, we can race anytime.
Oh, definitely.
That's what I keep saying.
I think we've been tested to the max this year.
Yeah.
There's a lot of outside factors that could have stopped what we were doing. So everyone's pulled together.
Would have been a lot easier. Yeah, would have been a lot easier to say no, we're going to leave it, and never. And it's probably the only season that you wouldn't have received any criticism for saying that as well. Just see what I mean? I think we showed all 4 hard tracks. I think we showed an appetite to race really this year, because it was all the excuses were there that we needed, weren't they? But we, like I say, we pulled it off. And I think if we can race this season, we can race any season, no matter what happens. Really, I think we've learned to roll with the punches, really, haven't we? I think.
And on that note, on that positive roundup of the season for all the tracks, Eric, I'd like to thank you for your time. We did kind of say we were gonna we'll do about an hour of this. We don't want to drag on, but it's nice just having a chat. It's nice talking about it. And what there's not on around the country, people in lockdown, so people can sit down tomorrow with a cup of tea and a bacon sandwich, or tonight if they want. And sit and watch. But thank you very much for taking time out of your evening.
No problem.
And talk about that.
Thank you for having me on. No problem. I've enjoyed it. I'll speak to you soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Eric. And ladies and gents, next week we'll be back with Craig Stevenson to talk about the York season of 2020 and what's coming up for them in 2021. But for tonight, thank you very much for your time, and we will see you next week.
Thank you. Good night.